Have you ever dreamt of somewhere you haven't been in a long time? The way the light plays on the walls, the familiar voices of the people who used to be around you all come fluttering back. As you step on firm, simple ground, you realise that something isn't quite right. You can't tell exactly what. Maybe it's the shape of the room, the pattern of the carpet, the look in your friend's eye as they see confusion flash across your face. This isn't how it happens. Whether it's one of those slow, creeping dread nightmares, or a dream that feels real enough to confuse with memory, it makes you doubt your perception even after waking. Is this right? It must be. There's a nagging at the back of your brain telling you that the pieces don't quite fit, an internal itch, a splinter in your mind. What you know, see, and feel are all at odds. That right there is the feeling of the uncanny. Uncanny horror often comes up when we're discussing machines and AI. Something modelled after the human form, but clearly isn't quite right. For some people it's a fascinating phenomenon, and for others just bringing a china doll out of the cupboard can clear the room in seconds. There's plenty of horror movies that play with this almost human element, from the Stepford Wives and Body Snatchers brand of replacement, to Us as Tethered, Perfect Blue's hallucinatory malicious doppelganger, and monsters galore that are almost human. Even outside of horror you can get intentional and unintentional uncanny characters. But the kind that I love most isn't necessarily body-focused, it's reality-focused. As you may have noticed from my channel, the gothic and tragedy genres are my favourites, and I think a lot of that comes from the idea of inevitability intertwined with the struggle to define yourself and your own story. The world pushes one idea and you push another, but we're defined by outside observation. If you place someone in solitary confinement, they no longer have anyone verifying what's real and true, and your brain attempts to conjure another observer or events to define you in opposition to. Absence becomes its own definer. I often circle back to the idea of us being social creatures, and the uncanny disturbs that sociability. When what you expect and what's happening don't quite mesh, stumbling over every accepted norm. The gothic genre often plays with social boundaries and their characters' understanding of the physical world around them, anxiously failing to decode the small talk and mannerisms of those around them. Every verbal interaction and every physical action is thrown into doubt until even the mundane becomes strange. When all that's left is your own echo telling you that story, those ripples of yourself start to spread out and become blurred around the edges. Every time you recall a memory, it adds to the inaccuracy as you recall your imperfect previous recollection. How real is that? Like that dream that keeps returning and casting doubt on all your memories, I love stories that infuse dread throughout the whole mess of reality. People, places, and time melt together into something not quite real, but still undeniably true. The only way to understand the core of this warped reality is to keep wading through, looking for the seed that birthed this scenario. Signalis is a game infused with repetition, with uncanny synchronization and derealization. You made a promise. To who? Well, to the girl with the white hair. My co-pilot? Yes, that's right. We were here together, in this room. I remember the touch of her hands, the way she coughed in the morning next to me, the subtle hitch of her breath when I cupped her cheek, the music she used to play. My beloved... Ariane? No, Alina. No. The scent of lilies. Or were they chrysanthemums? Datura. Sweat. Rust. Blood. I know she's close by, I just need to find her. Are you awake? Are you sure? Part 1. Mind and Body.
Is a hand a hand? Or is it just the fingers? Or the prints themselves?
You, as Elster, begin the game in a crashed scouting ship, the Penrose 512, looking for her crewmate, Ariane Young. After confirming that the ship will never fly again, you grab the photograph of Ariane from the pilot's seat, half of the photo stained beyond recognition. Was it you standing next to her when this was taken? As you search, you find the computer that tells you that she's no longer on board. One of the airlock suits is missing. Okay, so she must have gone out to assess the damage to the ship, but the key to the airlock is locked in the stasis chamber, snapped in two and bloody. I'm sure she's fine. It's fine. As you head outside in the hopes of finding her, you're caught in a snowstorm. the glare half blinding you as you stumble upwards through a black arch and find a deep red hole, a pore in the earth. Climbing down, there's another hole inside the wall of this fleshy well, and in you go. A radio room full of banned books, the national flag, and one book sharing the star design of the flag around its titular character, the King in Yellow. Picking it up causes the radio to crackle into life. A signal, a message flashes through Elster's circuits. Flashes of paintings, people, and a six-sided symbol flecked with blood, and you're in a mining and educational facility. And that's not Ariane in the photograph. The core of Signalis comes through the strange duality of our protagonist, Elster, and her lover, Ariane. Probably. Most of the game's characters we can speak to are robots called replicas, including Elster herself. Each model has their own strengths and weaknesses, specialised to perform specific tasks at maximum efficiency, but they work alongside regular old humans, called gestalts. Or human enough. The dictionary definition we find in-game doesn't actually say that gestalts are human, only that they're not replica. You're either a replica or you're not a replica. If you're not a replica, you're a gestalt. Neither seems to be socially above or below the other, though there's a particular skill that sets some apart: bioresonance. And we'll get to that, but immediately we're introduced to the uncanny bodies of our main cast. Each of these replicas is very nearly human. Yes, they're incredibly efficient and hard-wearing, but they still physically closely mimic humans. Except for the feet. Don't ask me why, but they removed the feet. They have soft, elastic skin, coolant that mimics blood in both colour and consistency, and dark hair. Their names are colloquialised acronyms. For instance, Elster coming from the blended sounds of LSTR, Elster, all corresponding to different birds in German. Elster means magpie, Eule means owl, and so on. Beyond that, some have chosen their own everyday names. It must be quite uncanny to have a whole company, or parliament, of 10 owl units, all with the same face, same height, and same voice. They like to name themselves after a concept, like flowers or months. I love that little humanising detail. Despite being identical and communal, they choose distinct but matching names. It reflects something about their inherent personality type, one of belonging and synchronicity. Elster, however, has kept her model moniker rather than choosing a new name, maybe because her replica model tends towards independence and keeps to themselves. Elster doesn't seem to fit in at the facility, or any of the places she ends up, so I expected her to have made herself a new name to break away from that, but nope. She's content with the basic model name, and I actually kind of like that. She has her function, her personality, and her own life, and whatever name she ascribes to that secondary to actually living that life. It's just not that important to her. A lot of the models look fairly similar, but their varying heights set types apart, most being dramatically taller than a regular human, immediately evoking a sense of the uncanny. Elster's firmly within regular human bounds, starting at 5'10", with the Euler's only a little smaller at 5'7". Aside from the tiny colibri, these are the shortest models we get. Mina, the tallest and designed for, well, mining, is 8'6". She's first introduced through a cutscene, her face flashing up and then melting away in a sea of bloody pixels flowing from her helmet before the visor snaps closed, shutting out any attempt to reach the person she used to be. I remember first reading Frankenstein and trying to picture the creature of gigantic stature, about 8 feet in height and proportionally large, but couldn't really imagine just how much taller he was than Victor. Sure, that's big. But it was so outside my everyday frame of reference that I couldn't really hold it in my mind. That's part of why I love Junji Ito's adaptation, because you can see him laid out, inanimate, as he's being made, or later sitting with his creator and... That's huge, what? There's something innately terrifying about your expectations being almost right and giving you a false sense of understanding and security, until the creature moves and... Oh, my prediction was not correct. Suddenly, you're unable to grasp the scale of it until it's towering over you, immediately making you reassess every other assumption you've made so far. Most of the replicas are taller than Elster, and you can get their heights from their data folders, but again, I'm bad at visualizing heights unless I have a baseline in front of me for comparison. The infected enemy replicas often hunch over, as if they can no longer support the whole of their frames. Stork in particular stands out to me, as I didn't even realise the infected variant was the same unit at first, the long legs buckled and the head being replaced with a large tube-like beak pointing down towards the ground. The adders also hunch up, heads twitching and guarded by club-like arms, but then you place them next to Minor and... oh no! I thought I knew what to expect from the cutscene of Minor from seeing her face, but then I was presented with the whole of her, the first boss fight of the game, and the first time seeing her unit type, and... ooh, that's big. That's an Uncanny Frankenstein moment right there. Almost all the models we meet appear feminine, apart from Adler, more on him later, with chin-length hair, chest pieces that curve outwards as if there were breasts under the armour, and often have colour resembling eyeshadow around the eyeliner-like black rims of their eyes. If these institutions, such as the mining facilities, consider all their units to be part of the corporate labour machine, I suspect that this is an individual attempt at expression, but it's hard to tell how distinct they are. Any worker that's slower, weaker, or sicker than others is immediately punished. The walls are covered in propaganda and instructional posters, and conformity is very much the focus. Yet keeping replicas happy is also absolutely critical to their well-being beyond productivity. So how does that work? Well, they're human. Sort of. Every replica has a mind, their own personality, their own preferences. Humanity learned how to save the neural pattern of real living humans and decided to make it everybody's problem. These neural patterns once belonged to a living person, one that the government decided was exceptional in their field. In the hopes of reproducing that skill in the replica, that pattern became the model's template. The Patriots in Metal Gear Solid wish they could produce a new Snake this easily. When a human's chosen to become a pattern, all references to the human original are removed from public records as well, obfuscating the source for this model's personality and skills. From activation, these replicas become uncanny walking memorials, a copy of somebody's instincts and quirks subconsciously informing every action, while simultaneously erasing the original from history. They're amnesiac ghosts, copied and pasted across who knows how many units. Each model comes with a set of instructions and artificial restrictions, a strange filtered duality of nature and nurture further reinforcing their narrowed potential. See, if the replica becomes distressed, then this can destabilize their personality, leading to malfunction, illness, or violence. To keep them happy, you give them objects that would have made the original human happy. For example, Miner, our gentle giant mining unit, likes teddy bears. Conversely, the guidelines prescribe objects to avoid giving, or actions to avoid doing around them.
You see, I never gave him a greater purpose. What must it be like to have nothing? Not even memories to visit in the middle of the night.
Replicas necessarily have a limited scope to grow, as they're not exposed to anything that could potentially challenge their sense of identity in case it destabilizes their core program. It must be strange to be a replica, instinctively feeling there's something you don't know, just on the edge of memory. They're as intelligent as an ordinary human, but they break once they encounter too much of an emotional challenge. Essentially, they're all treated as if they have complex post-traumatic stress disorder and cannot cope with reminders of particular events yet. In a human, this can be worked upon slowly through building anchors to the present, building a safe environment to work through talking therapy, but the replicas can't hold on to those memories without them interfering with their sense of reality permanently. They're changed by both what fragments they can remember, but even more deeply by what's only subconsciously bubbling under the circuits. They can't ever quite grasp it. To me, this is the essence of the uncanny. Knowing something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on why, but these replicas are kept there. There can never be any resolution. Most people know Charles Dickens for his classics about poverty, plucky orphans, and of course, A Christmas Carol.
No Jesus for us, Mises.
As he loved a good ghost story. Ghosts in the Gothic tend to be trapped in a strange liminal space, repeating the circumstances of their death until some need or desire is fulfilled by the living to allow them to pass on to the other side. They tend not to have much agency, but push the living into action. There's lines divided between the living and dead, actor and catalyst, included and excluded. It's no secret by now that I'm very fond of ghosts, but Dickens wrote a particularly interesting little story called The Signalman that functions in the same strange uncanny space that Signalis does, blurring the line between known and unknown. Remember how I said that Signalis is a game that plays with repetition? The Signalman does too. There are only signals without context, only a message, a reaching out to someone unseen. Understanding can only happen after tragedy. In The Signalman, a traveller spots a signalman working in a little box by the train line. His job is to manually change the train signals and pass on messages from stations to report any problems on the line. A traveller calls down to him saying, "Hello, below there," apparently on impulse, calling down to the man. Once they made a little light conversation, the signalman admits he's troubled, which the traveller seizes upon, trying to pry into the man's discomfort as quickly as possible as he sees the man's unused to talking to others, and this might be his only chance to get his story out of him. The signalman questions, "What made you cry, 'Hello, below there,' tonight?" The man's confused about the specificity and says, "Heaven knows, I cried something to that effect." "Not to that effect, sir. Those were the very words. I know them well." Something or someone has been shouting the same greeting over and over for days, trying to get his attention. The bell in his cabin rings, and the signalman bolts up to respond, yet the traveller can't hear it. He seems to be able to tell whether it was rung by a human or a ghost too. Nevertheless, he always responds, and takes it as seriously as a cry for help from the living, but when he goes outside to see the ghost making a gesture, he can't understand it, beyond that it's a warning. He knows something bad will happen, but he doesn't know what. When the signalman later repeats the gesture for the traveller, he can't help but attach the words, "For God's sake, clear the way," to it in his mind. He has a meaning, but no situation to attach it to yet. Almost like a replica half remembering something out of sight. Almost like Elster trying to remember her white-haired co-pilot. The ghost has warned the signalman twice already, appearing before a crash and a sudden death aboard the train respectively, using gestures for each. The arm wave for the crash, and covering its face in mourning for the death. Now it's back, only visible and audible to the signalman, and desperately warning him of something. He has nothing specific to report, but there's a growing certainty that something's very wrong. The traveller visits the signalman's shack 3 times too, descending down the cliffside to meet with him. The first time they speak lightly, the second the ghost is discussed and the signal bell rings silently, and the third time, the signalman's dead on the tracks. On seeing his body, the train driver explains the situation by reenacting it, waving his arms wildly and crying out, "For God's sake, clear the way!" The story is told through the traveller's eyes, and we as the readers are the traveller. Both the signalman and the traveller are haunted by words, symbols and gestures, unable to understand them for what they are until it's too late. Much like a ghost, traumatic memory is often swallowed by the subconscious, anchoring itself beneath the surface like tree roots. Dickens himself suffered symptoms of PTSD after being involved in a train accident, taking charge of the situation at the time, and even being bold enough to dive back into the carriage to rescue a manuscript of his. But eventually the symptoms caught up to him, and he suffered what was termed accident shock, or sometimes psychic shock at the time. He wrote this story a year later. The signalman's ghost intrudes on his peaceful, if isolated, work, as does the traveller, who then experiences his own form of haunting. That the signalman's ghost appears in a non-linear fashion, showing the response to a disaster before it happens, reflects that sense of time dilation, seconds stretching into minutes, that can happen during extremely stressful moments. Time warps and singular moments are returned to again and again and again, the brain trying to reorganise and make sense of everything, trying to contextualise the signal. And in both Dickens' story and Signalis, it begins to loop around on itself, twisting its head back around to start eating at its own tail. For the replicas too, their memories become a liminal space, an event that becomes divorced from both the past and present. It may not have happened to this unit, but that's not important. They have that experience and feel the same emotions the original mind did. They have grounding objects that can root them in the now, but can experience flashes of another time and place if exposed to something upsetting. Their original human memories, traumatic or otherwise, can surface and disrupt their sense of self, leading to a cascade of depersonalization and unreality, often triggering similar issues in other units around them, especially if they're a very social unit like Euler. Euler was a ballet dancer and thrives on socializing, needing a mirror in their dorms to check their appearance and music to either play or listen to. Isolate an Euler and put them in a dirty uniform and they'll have a horrible time very quickly. But the same is probably true of a human. It's the scale and severity that sets them apart, along with the lack of ability to adapt. This sort of balance is kept according to every type of unit's needs, some needing a close-knit community, some preferring to focus on work alone. During our time in these facilities, there seems to be a corrupting sickness spreading through both the replica and Gestalt populations, reducing the Gestalts to inky human-shaped blotches, a mere imprint of their bodies, and stripping the artificial flesh from the replicas, removing any capacity for thought or reason. As this happens, well, fear does not help with replica stability, and it makes them all the more vulnerable to infection. One stalk really took exception to being locked down in the dorm next to a troop of Oilers and thrust a knife deep into their music player. The Oilers didn't survive long. This is where the game's use of the Uncanny can really shine. This lack of internal cohesion makes both Elster and the player begin to doubt the authenticity of what they're seeing, from the strange transitions between areas, scattered notes, and the dialogue we have with other characters. One person you'll run into repeatedly is Issa, a human girl searching for her twin sister, Erica. Just like Elster, she's not one of the workers, and one of the first things she says is that, "You don't belong here either, do you?" She warns us of danger, finishing off an infected replica, but as she leaves the room she wishes us well in saying, "I hope you find who you're looking for." Elster did not say she was looking for anyone, but somehow, Issa knows. The next time you stumble into her, she asks that you pass on to Erica that she's looking for her, and reassures Elster that you'll recognise her when you see her, though this can easily be dismissed as the twins look similar enough to confuse their teacher. How similar they really are, though, is impossible to tell, as every time we see a picture of Erica, the image is disrupted, blackened, or digitally corrupted. Like two sides of a coin, they can never meet. This is the cycle Issa's trapped in, constantly searching for Erica around and around. Just another amnesiac ghost searching for their memories. Each time we meet her, she's more bloodied and scarred, her clothes more damaged, culminating in her succumbing to the infection in her family's old bookshop. In the same room where her body becomes a black stain on the world, we can see a memorial shrine to the two sisters. They've been dead the whole time. This is just another echo of a life, of one person's wish to see someone they loved one last time. But Issa isn't just a ghost repeating the same pattern. These looping cycles of regret and loss can interact with each other. Issa's loop isn't just happening next to Elster's loop to find Ariane, but actively crosses into the other's space. While the pair can interact and touch the same things, both corporeal and having a body that interacts with the world around them, sometimes the camera shifts from third person into first person, and some of these memories are Issa's. She's waiting in a school building for Erica, always separated from her in every version we're allowed to witness. She worries that Erica's gone home without her, and so hurries off to the library as the pair wanted to check out some books on their way home. But en route she sees a girl with white hair being thrown to the floor and kicked around by some other students. Immediately we flash back to Elster, who doesn't question the experience or comment, simply proceeding with the task at hand. She has a promise to keep. When my editor, Vixie, read this part of the script, she asked, "Is Elster a ghost?" And, well, stay tuned for more ambiguity and you can come to your own conclusions, if you like. That's kind of the point of the plot. Another of these strange interludes happens when you open a box inlaid with a butterfly design. Something we learn was confiscated from one Alina Seo after she collapsed at work and her bunk was searched. Unlocking it takes us to a radio outpost, much like a signal box you might say, where a mother and daughter live in isolation. A letter from a concerned aunt insisting that young Ariane move to the city with her to study and socialise. Right, so this is Ariane's childhood home, not Alina's. It's small and fairly bare, but there's some familiar radio operation guides and banned serials up on the shelf above the radio, and haven't I seen that carpet pattern somewhere before? We equip a little radio module behind Elster's ear, and by tuning to the correct frequency, we can get through the locked door to reach back to where Elster was standing. But we still have the radio. Again, no comment on this in-game, but the threads of Ariane, Elster, and Issa's lives all begin to tangle into each other. Not just through events, but through shared experiences that were never meant to be shared. Their formative moments blend together to the point where it's not always entirely certain whose eyes we're looking through if the memory's short enough. Does Elster believe now that she did that? How far is the separation if it informs your current experience? There's a mental overlap here, a spilling into each other, and this is where we come to Ariane. Part 2. Doubles.
You are of me, though you are not me. Is this what it's like to be a mother? Is this what it's like to be in love?
The photo of the initially white-haired Ariane immediately shifts to a woman with brown hair as soon as we move from the Penrose ship to the mining facility. This is Alina Seo. a worker on the Zipinski mining station who suffered frequently from ill health. Elster asks an injured replica if she's seen this woman, rather than naming Ariane or Alina, despite the photograph in our inventory having the name of the subject pictured in its description for both versions. Elster seems convinced that it's Alina we're looking for, rather than the co-pilot from the Penrose, and we find Alina's scattered diary entries throughout the facility. She writes about her weak constitution, and the punishments she faced for fainting at work, but also that she was involved with an Elster unit. And no, not our Elster. This Elster was brought in specially for the initial excavation of the mine, but in the diary, Alina worries that she hasn't seen her in a few days. People are going missing from the mine. More holes are being bored into the ground. More depths for Elster to dig through as she tries to catch up with Ariane. And suddenly, an illness begins to tear its way through the facility, infecting both replicas and Gestalts, but Elster's nowhere to be seen. It's as if she's never been here, and yet Adler, the administrator, has seen her too, an Elster with a distinctive orange chest piece. When our Elster encounters him, he confirms the photograph to be Alina, and then immediately pushes Elster down an empty elevator shaft into a truly staggering pile of Elsters. Let's just take a second to linger on that. A pile of Elster units, presumably pushed by Adler over and over and over again. How many times have we been here? Most people are probably familiar with the idea of a narrative foil, but if you aren't, it's a pair of characters that contrast each other to highlight something about the other. Each character has their own goals and ideas, but they're throwing up some nice parallels for the audience. You can consider how their individual circumstances have shaped them, and how they could easily trade places if things had been different. They might have similar traits like loyalty or bravery, but their worldviews are completely different. For instance, the classic video essay example is Aang and Zuko. Both are kind, skilled fighters, terrified of failing the ones they love, and journey across the world in order to try and restore something, balance and honour respectively. Will Turner and Jack Sparrow both question each other's morality throughout the Pirates of the Caribbean series. Will initially hates pirates and has a very law-dominated sense of right and wrong, but ultimately ends up trying to be a virtuous pirate. Jack, on the other hand, is generally self-interested and excuses his individualistic behaviour with the label pirate. The thing about foils is they can reflect more than one character. Will is a foil to Jack, Jack's a foil to Barbossa, and Norrington is a foil to Will. I bring this up to talk about a particular flavour of foil common in the Gothic, where the Uncanny finds its home. The Gothic double. These characters are usually a foil to the main character, but only to that character. They're usually defined by and define that singular person, and force them to see the worst parts of themselves, or sometimes anxieties and fears they didn't realise were even there till they meet them in the flesh. If they look identical, then they slip into doppelganger territory, being an uncanny copy, but that still works as an uncanny or Gothic double. They force the main characters to see themselves as they fear others see them, or how in their darker moments could be, will be, or have been. Black Swan's Nina is excellent at dancing the White Swan in Swan Lake, but the ballet's director is openly frustrated at how controlled and demure she is, making her incapable of dancing the more passionate and sensual Black Swan convincingly. Nina tries desperately to prove herself throughout the film, and strains against her overbearing mother and sheltered ideals, but she's partly spurred on by the arrival of a new dancer in the company, Lily. She's her opposite, casual and laid back, charming and mature, confident and flirtatious, and an obvious choice for the Black Swan. Nina immediately feels threatened, and most of the film has her comparing herself to Lily, fascinated, repulsed, and infatuated with her. Frankenstein and his creation would be an obvious, classically Gothic pair of creator and created, each defining the other. One is supported by his family and society, but rejects help and solace at every turn to hide his mistakes. The other's rejected by his creator and society, but pleads for help at every turn. Both desperately need other people, but are bound by their circumstances. I have a lot of things to say about Frankenstein, so I'll leave that there, but it's a really good example of the uncanny double, with the creature dogging Frankenstein's footsteps, and slowly fracturing his ties with the people around him, as he's tormented by the creature's serial murders. In Signalis, we have some flexible pairs of uncanny doubles. I've mentioned all the different replica models sharing the same face, but that's not really serving the purpose of doubling. That's just uncanny. But also, I've mentioned both Alina Seo and Ariane Young as people who are close to Elster. Which is which? Well, the game deliberately muddles this because Elster's confused, half remembering one or both of them. There are no clear answers, but I'll do my best to map this out simply before we get into it. Elster has a photo of Alina. Ariane once saw that photo of Alina and decided to join the Penrose project. There are 2 Elster models. Ariane was on the scouting ship with Elster 512, and Alina met Elster S2301. We are neither of these Elsters. They copied 512 to get our Elster after their original neural pattern was lost. In our Elster's mind, pulling from both 512's pattern and the pattern that she was based on, Alina and Ariane get mixed up. All the memories of the people that all the Elsters knew jumble together, but also time and grief aren't linear, and we don't know when most of these people were alive. Got it? No? Right, on to the story. Ariane was on the scouting ship with Elster 512, and Alina was on the mining facility as a worker with Elster S2301, but I will absolutely jumble those numbers, so I'm going to call it S23 from now on. Elster S23 goes down into the mines and finds something, a red arch or gateway. What happened down there isn't clear, but once she returns to the surface, Alina's consciousness begins to blur at the edges. Her hair begins to turn white like Ariane's, and her illnesses begin to deteriorate rapidly. The mine is where the corrupting infection began that kills Gestalts and corrodes the replicas.
Mines. There's something in the mines.
Alina remains quarantined in her quarters, but she begins to remember someone else's life.
I remember my name. And I remember my life. But I also remember a different name and a different life. And it feels like the line between her and me is blurring the longer I stay here.
Based on our context clues and the fact that as characters they're gothic doubles defined by each other in the narrative, she's presumably recalling Ariane's life. But Alina isn't a replica. Still, her memories are getting overwritten, like a replica's original human memories emerging. Something's tying her closely to Ariane, and as we progress through the game we find a note from Ariane's mother, proud for her daughter to begin her military service, and relieved that Ariane's gotten over yet another illness. It seems both Alina and Ariane are on the frail side. However, Ariane had sent her mother a photograph that she'd stumbled on, a subject looking so similar to Ariane that you could be twins. Guess who? Her mother doesn't recall anyone bearing the surname Seo in their family, but is surprised by how uncannily similar Alina looks to Ariane. Alina was a military veteran as well as a worker at the mining facility, and in a photo of her, she's standing next to someone we can't see because the photo's damaged, in exactly the same place as the photo of Ariane. Because of this, Ariane and Alina's faces swap sometimes in Elster's perception as our biased narrator. And speaking of photographs, Ariane used to work in her family's photography shop, opposite the Ito family's bookshop. It's Issa Ito that shows Ariane the photograph of Alina, probably wondering if the two are related given the resemblance. Searching Issa's shop also gives us a third photograph that looks very similar to Elster, but this is one of Issa's relatives, Lilith. As Lilith was a soldier, and we know that Elster's original neural pattern comes from one, Lilith could easily have been the basis for Elster. Remember I said that replicas had particular objects that could make them unstable depending on their neural patterns? Well, Elster's meant to avoid photographs, especially war photographs. I wonder why. You know, normally in these video essays, I try to explain important lore of the story, and then link it to the themes I want to examine. This keeps it accessible to viewers who haven't played the original game. Except in Signalis, there isn't a coherent linear story. There are multiple things happening here. Everyone's blurring and nothing's clear. Rather than a bullet, it's like a 4-dimensional shotgun shot, shooting plot points and vibes in every direction at once. That's one of the reasons why this video took so long. It got stuck in editing hell as I tried to explain it to my wife, who's also my script editor. The thing is though, this is why I like Signalis. It's not meant to make logical sense because there's no single correct interpretation of the lore. It doesn't matter if you keep track of every character or plot point I've mentioned. In all of my video essays, it's about the themes rather than the plot, but for Signalis, the game is about the themes rather than the plot. It's fundamentally gothic in its claustrophobic, uncanny atmosphere, and the characters' terror coming from being unable to draw boundaries between themselves and the other. Just look at the photograph of Lilith. Imagine being Issa, hopelessly lost in a place ravaged by infection, injured and exhausted, and then seeing a replica that looks just like your family. Issa's desperately searching for Erica as well, her identical twin. another pursuit of a mirror image. Issa sustains an injury that eerily mimics Lilith's as well. Another strange echo, as we never see what damages Issa's eye, but in the cutscene where she succumbs to the infection, she's wearing a bandage over the same eye. We get flashes of her looking at her twitching, injured hands in a mirror, horrified, as if her body is no longer her own. Whilst the infection's likely at the forefront of her mind, I wonder if there was some deeper part of Issa that recognised someone else in the mirror there. Some deep pull of memory at seeing Lilith injured. And later, Elster too takes a knife to the eye when forcing her way through another arch in the wasteland, forcing the cycle to repeat one more time. The same wound, the same defiance, the same fate. After Ariane sees the photograph of Alina, she too can't help but wonder about her mirror image. She wonders if she was happy. Was her family proud of her? Did her comrades love her? Since we looked alike, could I have been like her? Ariane identifying with and projecting a potential self onto the soldiers what convinces her to sign up to the Penrose Scout program in the first place, where she'd meet Elster 512 as her replica mechanic. She's painfully aware that she didn't fit in at school, even with the twins' friendship, and her teachers push her towards the military to beat the creative and artistic streak out of her. Her paintings can still be found on the final, degraded version of the Penrose. She was still passionate to the end. And this passion dooms both her and Elster 512, as Ariane deliberately doesn't open the warning that Elster comes packaged with, slowly bonding with and falling in love with Elster over several years alone in space.
To avoid resurfacing of Gestalt memories, do not show or give the Elster unit photographs, especially of soldiers during the war. Do not show the Elster unit movies or let it listen to music. Do not try to befriend the Elster unit.
Uh-oh. So, this may all be a fever dream of Elster's corrupted memories, visions of Ariane, her art and life, and the sickness that killed both of them in the end. It might be a restless ghost. This may be a personality cascade. It might be purgatory, or an infection sprung from those pores in the earth, something terrible unleashed from the mines. As Elster's original pattern was lost, and future units became based on 512's neural pattern, all of them are now caught in this unending cycle. All of them remember a promise to a dying Ariane. All of them love her. All of them need to find her. But wait, there's more! Someone else also has Elster's memories. Falke. Who's Falke? Falke is a super soldier who's going to save the world. Probably. There are propaganda posters throughout most of the game. Some about the Penrose program, some regarding model types, and some simple travel ones of other planets throughout the system. But Falke's poster describes her as the Wunderwaffen, or Wonder Weapon, standing proudly with the Eugen nation's flag over a crushed symbol of the enemy empire. I really don't have much idea about who the Empire really are, except for they're the enemy, so, you know, the propaganda's working. She's even made in the image of the nation's leaders. She's deliberately designed to look like the ruling family, an uncanny living piece of propaganda in herself. That has to do something to your self-perception, even if you are programmed to fight. I wonder if she feared not being able to live up to expectation, or whether she became arrogant and self-assured. Perhaps she took comfort in the people's belief and made sure to take care of them as a ruler should. We don't get to know. A lot of replicas are fighters, and as Elster's based on a soldier, the underlying themes of imperialism, war, and violence are always lurking in her shadow. The Penrose mission, as a scouting mission, is designed to find new territory to inhabit and absorb into our great nation. Falke is a proud leader and a bioresonant replica, someone who can connect to the wavelengths of other replicas and gestalts, and extract information without torture. She has telekinesis too, throwing objects around without moving them and blistering the enemy's morale with her mind powers.
I tried to run from it, but it picked me up with its mind powers and shook me like a doll.
No wonder she's the Wunderwaffen. However, we find Falke on Sierpinski, where Alina lived, where Elster S23 went into the mines and disappeared, where sickness spread from shortly afterwards. Falke's comatose on a bed, clutching an L-shaped box with a speaker. To open it, we need to play her a song. Now, who likes music? Eule. Oh yeah, their name translates to owl, doesn't it? The game loves to play with patterns and false expectations, even featuring a fake ending you need to push past to keep going. It references the phenomenon of pareidolia, which is when we see patterns and images in something that aren't really there, like finding pictures in the clouds, or faces in tree knots. With Signalis, firm answers are in short supply, and a lot of the details are left fuzzy, and I'd argue that ambiguity is part of the point. Elster's reality is only this: conflict. It doesn't matter if something's concretely true or not. What did this mean to the characters who lived it? Anyhow, by following the trail back through the Oilers' quarters, you can fix up their broken music tape and broadcast it through your radio, Ariane's radio, to Falke. It's Swan Lake, another invocation of a bird, and a beautiful royal bird at that. Falkers act as commanders on their individual stations, each one leading the other units below them. They can access the known issues with all the other units to help stabilise them, and order destabilised ones to be decommissioned, but nobody gets to see Falke's potential issues. They don't have the clearance for that. Second in command is the Adler unit, a security officer taking direct orders from Falke, and the one masculine-looking unit we see. He actually acts as an antagonist throughout most of the game, shoving Elster down the elevator and stalking Issa to stop her investigating, but he's just as afraid and confused as the others. He just masks it better. Adler runs a tight ship, ordering interrogations that frequently result in death, starvation, and torture. He follows rules to the letter without question. Or at least, he didn't used to question. He's not redeemed by any means, and even glitches the whole of Elster's vision with a bright red screen that overwhelms her, stating that, "I hate everything." But what drove him here was this endless repetition, and he's desperately trying to make it stop. He can see that reality's warping around Elster, and is repeatedly trying to kill anyone that's contorting his and everyone else's reality. He can feel it splintering and weakening around him, and is afraid that it can no longer support itself and will collapse. And he's probably right. With Falke in a coma, he has nobody left to report to. The structure he relied upon to give his life meaning and purpose is gone. I genuinely believe he loved Falke, though I doubt he'd admit it, instead devoting himself to her as a subordinate rather than a lover. There's even a moment where he leans down and kisses Falke's forehead in the exact same way Elster kisses Ariane's, frame for frame. Could this have been a conformist Elster's fate? It's a small gesture, but for a unit that defines himself through strict procedure and discipline, it's unexpectedly gentle and human. He says that something about her changed when she returned from the mines. She was no longer our beloved leader, Falke. Once Falke's been beneath the earth and entered that same deep pool that Elster did, she comes back altered and refuses to speak about it, and this leads her to fall ill with the infection that ravages the station. Whatever's down there, whatever Elsa S23 did down there, unbalances everything. In a journal that Adler has locked away, all of the pages have the same date, and he fears he'll be decommissioned if anyone finds it. He's afraid that his memories are untrustworthy, of an uncanny reality overlapping with itself, and as he was designed to be Falke's second in command, he's meant to be easy to control or influence with bioresonance. When Falke falls ill, Adler's immediately drawn into her reality, and suddenly he remembers an Elster unit. Clearly a model I've never seen before, some type of engineer with an orange chest piece. In my memory she was just another member of our staff, but no such replica was ever stationed on Sierpinski. Ah! Oh dear. Adler realises that this memory loop is changing and shifting, and not simply repeating, but degrading. A story misremembered, slowly morphing with each retelling, like genetic material mutating and evolving, like the replica mind copied over and over from an aging template. He suddenly sees himself in everything and everything in himself and can't untangle the two. His mind itself is unreliable, as is everyone's around him, and the terror of this drives him to try and kill everyone who's contributing to it. Just being alive draws him down into a collapsing spiral, the loop never closing but getting claustrophobically smaller each time, crushing him into less than nothing, yet still surviving for the next twist of the circle. A monstrous existence. He just wants it to stop. Falke's journal as well shows she feels poisoned or contaminated by another person's memory. The idea of contamination and rot, of bloodlines collapsing incestuously in on themselves, is something deeply gothic, usually in trying to extend the life of a bloodline past its natural span, as with the Usher family in Poe's Fall of the House of Usher, using incest to keep the line pure. Wild Dorian Gray tries to unnaturally extend his youthful appearance, using a painting to offset the true state of his soul rather than his own body. Here, it's a perception of time itself recursively collapsing inwards. This small span of time is stretching itself to breaking point, trying to extend the moment just a bit longer, to buy Elster just a little more time to find Ariane. This seems to be what's causing the plague, the infection paring replicas down to their bones and stripping away their flesh. It's too close to itself, pressing in on itself and crushing the people that experienced it, making itself less stable with each and every iteration. Falke is herself, but also Elster, yearning for a white-haired girl she doesn't even know. She's caught between two people and can't resolve either, and she doubts every memory she has. In the final confrontation with Elster, she rises up from her coma, a halo of spears framing her head, an angel, a messenger, a saint, a martyr, glaring at Elster through a mask of grief. She'll never dance with us again, no matter what we do. She doesn't even want us anymore. Adler and Falke, Falke and Elster, Elster and Ariane, Ariane and Alina, Alina and Adler. All of them are tumbling into each other in cycles of love and hate, all struggling to remember who they were and who they may be. None have a future. Part 3. Liminality.
One hope within two wills, one will beneath. Two overshadowing minds. One life, one death. One heaven, one hell. One immortality, and one annihilation. Woe is me.
All of this comes back to Elster's original goal, keep her promise to Ariane. What was that promise? And of course, how did Elster 512 die? As we know, Elster 512 was a general mechanic for the scout ship Penrose 512. She was assigned a young Gestalt crew member, Ariane Young, and their mission was to go out into space to find new territory to colonize, rarely receiving correspondence. We don't get much information about what they're meant to be doing on the first leg of the journey, as they simply travel outwards, but Ariane slowly gets to know Elster. After all, there's nobody else. There's even a special calibration pod for Elster in case her persona starts to destabilize, and a stasis chamber for Ariane in case she becomes ill or injured without a doctor aboard. They're in it for the long haul. A cycle is a day, and Ariane even adjusts the ship's clocks to match Vinettan time and wonders if Elster will notice. She's clocked Elster as Vinettan by her accent, finding a small bit of home in that, as she pronounces ship just like Issa and Eri used to. It's very cute. This initial stage lasts 1500 cycles, so that's about 4 years and a month. That's a long time to just sit around and smell the roses. Ariane and Elster fall in love, spending increasing amounts of time together, listening to music, dancing, watching old films and painting. Phase 2 then begins, marked by a special briefing that states, "Your search for new worlds will begin." By this point, Elster and Ariane are definitely head over heels, as a note from Ariane on day 1024 says that, "Before I met Elster, I never believed I'd find someone I could fall in love with like that." And they were crewmates. Oh my god, they were crewmates. I expect this marks the point where they'd be doing a lot more investigation of planets to find habitable ones, and perhaps why we crash on a snowy planet at the beginning. Though none was suitable, it's likely the two scouted out many other worlds. Digging into the cold ground almost becomes a form of hibernation, somehow tunneling into Ariane's old bedroom, her space, to shelter from the new strange reality outside. A thought of Ariane is Elster's thread in the labyrinth. Finally, we hit Phase 3, the last one. After 8 years and 2 months, give or take, they get one last message from Command.
If you have not found a suitable world for landing by this point, accept that you will not. Find solace in the thought that others might be successful where you have failed. As you are probably aware, your ship's spare parts and rations will soon be depleted. Life support systems and reactor shielding will soon begin to fail, and radiation may begin to leak from the cooling system. We recommend you do not attempt to prolong your suffering by reusing old filters or begin rationing supplies. Instead, make peace with your fate. We suggest that you ask your replica, while it is still functional, to spare you from a slow and agonizing death, or that you take permanent rest in the cryogenic pod. Remember, you will die having served your nation by partaking in a glorious demonstration of our power.
Soon, both of them will be dead, if the ship doesn't give out first. Elster's sell-by date's approaching, and Ariane has always been sickly. She probably won't last long without supplies. But somehow she does. And it's brutal. Whilst Ariane is alive, she's in agony and lives in a dissociative fugue state. All she really knows is that she loves Elster and that it hurts. She wants it to stop. We find notes smeared with blood around the ship after fighting our way through. Ariane's paintings left unfinished around the ship. As they run out of spare parts, the ship's infrastructure begins to fail and radiation leaks from the pipes. Neither of them say it, but they both know that this is the end. Ariane's hair begins to fall out, her skin splitting, lungs foaming, teeth falling out. She can barely sleep, living in a haze of pain, reality warping around her. If, like Alina and Falke, she too is bioresonant, then it's likely this would have affected Elster's perception of reality as well, altering her mind and possibly the ship around them. In reaching out to the one she loves, she may have badly hurt her, and Elster was willing to take it to save Ariane's life. In the end, Elster seals her away in the cryopod to stop her suffering. At the end of our journey, Elster forces her way past Adler, a knife driven into his eye, and passes through the red gate once again. Upon reaching the ship, she can't manage to open the door, trying to brute force it open and losing an arm in the process, the blood or oxidant loss killing her. That's it? All of this and she just dies? No, of course not. Remember I said there was a fake ending? Of course you do. Right, so the life leaves Elster's eyes, and the eye on the title screen mimics this, no longer looking at whatever options you're selecting. But upon hitting begin, you start the loop again in your cryopod, persona restabilized. This time you can look around more of the ship, carrying out your daily checks of the Penrose, and find the instructions that Ariane refused to open that likely destabilized you. You check in with Ariane and get that montage of them enjoying each other's company, dancing and listening to music and films together, snuggled up in Ariane's bunk before the scene is interrupted by a signal. A call goes out to Elster, enunciating the same numbers as the opening. We pass through a red door in the painted aisle, Ariane appearing by our corpse, and she asks if we remember our promise. Immediately we wake in the Penrose again, and following a trail of Ariane's blood-smeared diary pages, we find another Elster unit, slumped against the cryopod that's barely containing a ripe, pulsating mound of flesh. And she, we take. We have a promise to keep. Elster tears what she needs from this body, her body, my body, outfitting herself in the other's combat armour, and walks across the shores of the painted isle, and we're back on Sierpinski, doors blocked by living tissue. We haven't really talked much about bioresonance, or the strange island we keep coming back to, and that's partially because bioresonance isn't really discussed in depth in-game. Some documents acknowledge how limited it is, but that it's what led the Eugen nation to free itself from the Empire. Whoever wrote this worried that we've become overly dependent on a poorly understood technology controlled solely by a few gifted individuals. Too many eggs in too few baskets, but something so critical to the national identity that it's made its way onto the flag, the 3 stars denoting bioresonance. Colibri is a unit that masks itself and its numbers using bioresonance to project fake copies of itself to distract you and distort Elster's field of vision, disrupting your thoughts and senses into a kind of sensory overwhelm. Now infected, their heads are swollen, unable to contain this corrupting, leaking signal. Their message will be spread, whether they intend it or not, and if one is infected, it'll rip through their company like wildfire. They used to accompany Falke as a team of amplifiers, strengthening her signals, but now they're left haunting the facilities with images of things they may never have even witnessed themselves. Earlier on in the game, you do find one solitary Colibri left behind by her group, the rest being corrupted. She can't understand their thoughts anymore, cut out of the hive mind, and now she's locked herself in the library, unable to bear listening to a song that rejects her. Part of her wants to walk outside and give in to the corruption, and another hangs on to the self-preservation trained into a military support unit. Who is she without the rest of her squad? Will she survive long enough to find out? They often transmit the image of an island to you, one that Ariane painted, and where you'll eventually walk yourself. It's a real painting by Arnold Böcklin called Isle of the Dead, and fittingly, it also had multiple versions created, 6 in total. There's something significant about the number 6 throughout the game as well. We see a lineup of 6 figures, 6 gestalts, and then 6 replicas, with an unknown voice calling their names. When Elina Seo is called, only one woman turns around in response. When Elster's name is called at the end of the game, every replica turns around one by one. They're all Elster, but individual versions, each loop cascading through time and memory. When Ariane Young's name is called though, all 6 gestalts turn at the same time, including the one who answered to Elina Seo. All of them are suspended in time, waiting for Elster to keep her promise. It's a fascinating little detail that you can interpret a lot of different ways, But who's calling to who, and who answers is a question with a seemingly endless answer. The island you visit is based on another painting by Eugen Bracht, which has a similar enough style and feel to Isle of the Dead. I'd assumed it was the same artist, but no, this is Shores of Oblivion, with the same air of solemnity, the landscape dominated by two towering tomb-like cliffs. Again, we're seeing ripples of inspiration flowing out and pieces being put in conversation with each other to define themselves. As you progress, there's a crossing of boundaries between the fragile skin of a body and the tissue inside it. The earth described as having pores, and Elster jumping down multiple crevices through layers of metal and meat. Something happened down in the mines to Elster and Falke, something that began a ricochet of time and life and death, a seeping or leakage or submerging of one into another, some contamination. A skin was perforated, and now something's bubbling out and changing the very core of you. Isle of the Dead was a pretty popular painting, and when I had a look to see what other works have been inspired by it, take a look at this one from 2013. This is Dead Island by Suguru Tanaka, the island itself now being made of flesh, the natural cliff formations uniform and cubic as if deliberately designed by human hands, the trees replaced by human effigies. It's an uncanny echo of Böcklin's island, centering the immediacy of the body in death, not the environment ready to swallow it up, or the ceremonial aspect of mourning. Or at least that's what I take from them as a pair. Because again, that's the thing about art and perception. There isn't an answer, and that's part of what I like about it. Even then, there's Isle of Life by the original artist, showing a different island but filled with people, trees and animals all moving. There's an eerie sense of stillness to Isle of the Dead, as if it's waiting for something. Life and death are another boundary being crossed here. These islands, in-game and out-of-game, serving as the liminal space between two states. This is where you pass through to come out one side or the other. The word liminal has been thrown around a lot of internet horror, with the infamous backrooms and leaking out into monster chase-style games, but there's a lot of them we encounter in everyday life. Places that are designed to be passed through but not stayed in, or a transitional space. Gas stations, shops and malls, car parks, hotels. Add in a late night where it's just you wandering through a usually crowded space, and you have a perfect unsettling space where anything might happen, even the impossible. I adore Meg Rossoff's Just In Case, and I've reread it every year or so since I was a teenager. It's all about 15-year-old David Case, who feels hunted by fate itself, and so undergoes a transformation of his clothing, friends and body language. He's studying to be anyone but himself, renaming himself Justin, his anxiety fizzing around him and blurring the edges of his reality. He's picked up by a photographer and art student, Agnes, who helps style him into another person to the point where he doesn't recognise himself in her pictures, half gratified by this and half swallowing down the terror of the uncanny. He trains himself to become a runner with his new imaginary greyhound. Every part of him wants to go, to flee, to seek safety through dissociation. What temporarily frees him from this anxiety is running away to an airport in frantic search of a destination. But then he realises that he's already found one. Airports are explicitly designed to be a place to pass through rather than to stay. Justin spends his days finding a new routine, clinging to the comfort of badly microwaved food at the cafes, and the showers to wash away the sludge he imagines caking his brain and pores. He can't belong in his family home, or school, or friend's house, and so he chooses to belong to the nowhere, the in-between space of a journey. There's peace without the pressure of performance for any of these places, and fate seems to go quiet in the back of his head. And then, there's the plane crash. As Agnes comes to try and force Justin to come home, an airplane rips through the roof of the airport, carving its way through the crowd, and Justin isn't quite back to the land of the living. Time stretches and dilates, just like Signalis' uncanny time. There's something else on the ground as well.
It is an oversized magazine on the ground, creased open and spattered with blood. There is a picture of a boy in the magazine, and he's wearing clothes that look vaguely familiar. There is something in the face staring up at you that reminds you of someone or something, but you can't quite remember who or what.
He sees an image of himself, dressed and posed by Agnes, confused at the nagging feeling of familiarity, but unable to place who that person is. Perhaps this is how Ariane felt when she saw Elena's picture, or Issa when looking at her own twitching reflection. Agnes copes with the tragedy the way she always does, by making it into art. Rather than Ariane's paintings, she displays her photographs of the crash in a small gallery and sews apocalyptic fashion. She wraps herself in a mimicry of gore, even using surgical thread to outline the holes in her outfit, with red beads highlighting droplets of blood. Justin's horrified, especially when he sees photographs of his own dissociated, wondering expression. Again, he's torn between thinking the shots look gorgeous, while simultaneously disturbed at having his own pain writ large on a canvas and displayed without context for a crowd of strangers. It leaves him vulnerable and displaced in the shrine to a disaster he was at the centre of, and in his own anxiety-fueled thoughts, his fault for tempting fate. Agnes tries to display the horror she felt, but uses his moments of fear and vulnerability to add a more romantic lens to her photographs and soften the moment. Throughout the book, she frequently tells Justin to stop being so serious and that it's just fashion, but this representation of Justin's physical and mental anguish being displayed for all to see really drives home how deeply Agnes has been grooming him for her art. He finally exits his liminal reality in disgust, after realising that lingering here has left him open to unwillingly become someone else's pet muse. Of course, Elster's a willing muse for Ariane's art, as the pair are genuinely in love, but I find it interesting that Elster has to navigate representations of Ariane's art and expression to make her way back to her side. The more Ariane's mind and body affect the world, the fleshier it becomes, her illness infecting the landscape and blocking corridors with overgrown tumours. The closer Elster gets to her, the clearer the signal, and the worse it gets. Ariane's pain becomes writ large upon surfaces that shouldn't even be capable of infection, but still it pulses with life and writhes in agony. Ariane's body may be in stasis, but clearly part of her still suffering. As this is a video game, and maybe an unconscious mess for Elster, all we have to communicate this with is art. Much like Agnes's photographs, we're tracing the horror of flesh, blood, and suffering to uncover a loved one underneath. How many paintings did Ariane make while her body deteriorated? Was it something she used to distract herself, or to reckon with that pain? I have chronic pain, and yeah, I get it. Ariane's diary is scattered around the painted aisle the second time you arrive, silently begging for death, but ultimately unable to cross that barrier. She exists here until you fulfill your promise. Time hasn't so much stopped for her, but wriggles around on itself. Something primordial trying to reach out of the ocean and pull her under, but she's waiting for you. An ocean of memories, where I ends and we begins. Her bioresonance reorders, reimagines, recombines everything and everyone she knows until everyone is simply here. This is what Adler was so afraid of. This can't continue much longer. Soon everything will collapse into itself like a dying star. Think back all the way to the beginning of this mess, and the key you found in the stasis chamber severed in two and bloody. Your key, your goal, your resolution is through that body. This liminality that Elster exists in makes it possible for endless iterations and interpretations of her, and the same goes for all the other characters we meet, but it's Elster's body we see copied and piled up in the elevator shaft. She doesn't fade away like Issa, or like comatose like Falke. Adler seems to know he's repeating, but the only evidence is what he writes in his journal, the thoughts he recorded, but Elster leaves a physical body behind. All of this revolves around her. We know that the replicas can't really grow and adapt in the same way that humans can, but Elster's living proof of a more adaptable neural pattern. This liminal space contorts her into different, pragmatic, guarded Elsters, splicing her into other people's memories, and the player themselves will have their own idea of what makes Elster tick at various points of the game. All of the endings, aside from the special super secret one, are some variation of Ariane and Elster dying. Either one or both will meet their end here, and the only way to close the loop is to ensure that you go together. Your promise was to kill Ariane and end her suffering. If you manage it, then as soon as you release her, your body finally gives up and slumps against her life support turned coffin, finally at peace. It makes me wonder whether this repetition was partially caused by Elster or Ariane, or both. A mutual wanting. Was it just Ariane's sickness causing her bioresonance to go haywire, translating what she felt outwards and drawing Elster back to her? Is this a glitch in a sickly Elster's system after all the coolant is leaked on the Penrose and Ariane has nothing to do with it? Does it matter? This lack of integration between memories and experience makes Signalis a weird, uncanny space to pick through, and I love how it turns everything inside out and right side in over and over as Elster tries to hold on to the one thing that matters. Her promise is her guiding light, even when she can't remember what it is. But that care, that personal will, keeps her following through every labyrinth corridor and fleshy pit. Though there are infinite Elsters, All of them love and are loved endlessly. An uncanny hand reaches for you from the darkness once more. Will you take it? Can't say co-pilot, I want to say coke pilot, and that's definitely not right. It doesn't matter if something's concretely true on concretely. Concrete, baby. I left a word in where it shouldn't be. I need to pause for a drink because Jesus Christ, Dickens. Nearly done. Ooh, hello. Like that dream that keeps returning. Ooh. You, as Elster, begin the game in a crashing ship. I need to sip some water because it's going wrong. It's going wrong. Oh no. Oh no. That's too many sounds. He actually acts as an That's like 5 words starting with A in a row. What is wrong with you? Why did you write this? You.